Good evening. Welcome, and certainly staff members, you get bonus points for being here tonight. Community members, thank you for being here tonight. I've met most people. If I've not met you, my name is Bob Hunt. I'm the superintendent of schools, and just very thankful that you are here enduring the cold weather. We're going to start with a very important public service announcement. We will be in school tomorrow. I've had many requests from parents to make sure that this weekend was not extended any further and ready to send their children back. So we will be certainly in school tomorrow. Tonight's an exciting night as we really start to move away from the assessment phase of this process and really into the options phase. And we thought it was important, especially for our building team representatives, to spend some time really thinking about how educational space can support teaching and learning. So as we brainstorm and evaluate options, thinking how space can help. And I can tell you 10 years ago when the district went through this process, I had to do a lot of things with visuals and pictures and go on tours to see spaces. And now we have the luxury where we have 5 elementary buildings and a high school that are built and have created these collaborative spaces that our students have experienced, and we'll talk a little bit about student voice today, and that our staff certainly have the benefit of working in. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about teaching and learning in Upper Arlington, a little bit about our strategic plan and some of the things within that plan that are very specific to learning, so you can kind of bring that lens to your work at the building teams moving forward. We're going to have our partners from Perkins and Will talk about future-ready learning environments, so what they're seeing throughout the country in terms of school design and how it can support teaching and learning. And then really, most importantly, get some additional feedback from you, as that is probably the most important thing that we do at every one of these meetings. So if you have not been following along, we've engaged in a process built off of the great work that was done 10 years ago when the district assessed all of their facilities district-wide and made the decision to move forward with the 5 elementaries and the high school within phase 1. And at that point, it was decided that both middle schools in Burbank would need to wait due to the condition of their building, the ability that they could continue on, as well as just a capacity issue, how much could be done in a certain phase. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's been 10 years since that conversation, and we're back to work with our community on defining what options and what future we want for the remaining buildings, and that is where we're at. So we spent most of this fall, or early in this phase, really assessing the current facilities. Our last community shared out all of the results of those assessments and put some costs to what it would take just to maintain the building as is, and not change them structurally or from a teaching and learning standpoint, but maintain them as is moving forward. And I think that number was about $103 million for those 3 structures. Now we're in the options phase, and that's where our building teams, a lot of you that are in this room serving on those teams, get to think about where we are and where we aspire to be with these buildings, and create options for consideration. That phase will go on throughout this spring, and hopefully by June we have identified the options and costs, and then we'll work on the financial side of this and hand this off for a much deeper dive on the financial side. So that's where we are in terms of the process, and again, just really appreciate you being here tonight. So when we talk about learning, I think it's important that we start with where we are as kind of a nation and a country, and kind of set the landscape of what's going on, and then personalize it a little bit to Upper Arlington. So I came across this study a few years ago, and it was a look at teenagers and the adult activities that maybe we did and were really important to us when we were teenagers, that are maybe not so important to the teenagers of today. And it indicates this change and this shift in what they value and the things that they do. So I know you all can't read this, so I'll help you with the colors up here. These lines from left to right start in 1976 and go all the way to 2016, and it's percentage of students that have pursued these things in their teenage years. So if you look at driver's license, I think back And it was like the most important thing to me. Like I could not wait until my 16th birthday to go get my driver's license because I thought freedom lied in like just going like one town over. But if you look at the percentage and the decline in that blue line of students who get driver's license, I've experienced it with my older son. He's like, "You're 16, bud. Let's go. Let's get the driver's license." It just wasn't really important to him. So that's one indicator. The other up here is tried alcohol. This is a good one. So this is going down. The red line is ever dated, and the other line is work for pay. So when I kept looking at this, I was trying to think, like, what are kids doing, and what are the cause of these things? So this is not in the study, but I just overlaid the social media and internet and when things started to be released. So when you start to see this decline in 2000, that's when the internet really started to gain popularity, and overlaid smartphones and Facebook and Twitter, or X now, and Instagram. So students are obviously occupying their time in different ways, and that has implications for what we do in classrooms every single day. The other thing that we look at is this idea of student engagement, and how engaged are they in their learning environment. And this is a national study that Gallup did that looks at student engagement, and specifically about 5th grade. So if you're in the K-5 realm, students remain pretty engaged, especially nationally. Starting in grade 6 and down, there's a drop between 6 and 12. So this idea of how engaged are they by our schools and what we're doing in our schools every single day. So if you personalize this and take a look at UA, we obviously value student voice, and we spend a lot of time trying to understand how our students are experiencing their education on a regular basis. And if you look at these two graphics up here, this is from the winter survey, correct, Denise? So the most recent survey? Fall survey of our students. So when we look at sense of belonging and we look at perseverance especially, you see that decline as students are moving through the educational system. And I think the good news is if we were to overlay national averages, we'd look very, very good. But these are things we look at and consider when we think about how engaged are our students and how can we engage them in more authentic educational experiences to really increase and improve the student learning as we go. So we always include this slide, our mission and vision and values within the organization. The good part of our strategic planning process that I went through last year was there's a lot of affirmation around these three elements, that there's a lot of pride and a lot of community involvement in buying into mission, vision, and values. So those have remained unchanged as we move into our strategic plan. Our newest strategic plan was approved by the Board of Education actually right when we came back in January at our first regular meeting. And this is a result of a lot of hard work by the entire community. We spent a lot of time engaging in conversation with our community, with our staff and our students about what the next 10 years of our schools should look like and what that experience should look like. And as we developed this into a framework, really three foundational pillars came out. This idea of student engagement, engaged learning, connections, and climate and culture. Before I jump into those, I do want to just point out two words that you see kind of circling around that framework. The idea and the concept and the words of excellence and innovation kept coming up as we had conversations with our community and our staff about our school. Excellence being this idea of being an organization that is continuously committed to continuous improvement, that we're constantly trying to provide an educational experience that's relevant and pushes our students towards the attainment of our district mission. The other one was around innovation, and this looked a lot of different ways. Some people would point to programs and they'd say, look at how many AP offerings, or look how many clubs and activities or sports, or IB, that's progressive, or a progressive program. Those were all innovative programs. But it also came up that when COVID happened, kind of everything shut down, and we just went into kind of survival mode. And this desire to make sure that we continue to be an innovative district that is really setting the bar for public education. So this plan is committed to those two things as we go forward. I'm not going to dive into each component of the strategic plan tonight, but I asked our Chief Academic Officer to talk to you about engaged learning, again, to frame some of the things that lie ahead for us from a teaching and learning perspective as you start to brainstorm and think about how our facilities from a design perspective can support that work. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pomeroy.
Great. Good evening. Thank you for being here. Keith Pomeroy, Chief Academic Officer. I'm actually going to start by going back to that chart because when my oldest turned 16 and needed that driver's license, eventually we had that conversation about this isn't about you. It's about us not driving to every location anymore, and you need to be able to help us out a little bit. And it's sad that we get to that point that we had to convince him he had to do it. When we look at this element, engaged learning, this is one portion of the strategic plan. But when we think about our classrooms, you're going to see us focusing in on how are we challenging and supporting every student every step of the way. And there's multiple things there. Number one, we think it's critically important to maintain academic excellence. We are excellent as a district. How do we maintain that academic excellence in foundational learning? But also then, how are we narrowing in on the profile of an engaged learner? And what are we doing to prioritize those experiences? So authentic academic experiences such as service learning, real life learning opportunities, and personalized pathways. And I have a couple things to say about that. So the world is changing, right? So what we're preparing kids for is changing on a consistent basis. And you'll see us, we're responding to this as a state. I think you see it locally in even the changes that are happening in terms of the workforce we need long term in Central Ohio and the massive growth that we're seeing in different industries in this area. And the opportunities for our kids and the way that's changed that they can seek those opportunities, we need to think differently about how we're doing that. You saw us respond to that a bit a year ago when we applied to the state for a CTE equipment grant, which is career technical dollars for an equipment grant. And we used that opportunity to reopen our old central office, 1950 North Mallway, with 4 different programs connected to what we were doing there and giving different opportunities for kids. So looking at those opportunities that do things like give kids long-term work-based learning as well, so actual internships so that they can think about what they can do, industry-recognized credentials, and how are we creating those opportunities for kids. But even from a very young age, how are we creating authentic experiences for our kids to experience all of those things? You'll see us also focus on the need to have a long-term professional learning plan. How are we taking that into account for ourselves as professionals within the district and creating a plan so that we can connect to those goals and support the needs of each building, because the needs are different in each building in terms of how we support what's happening with our students. And then the last item on here says evaluate, monitor, and facilitate balanced and safe use of technology. So we're looking at technologies. I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's a thing happening. It's called AI. Some of you might have heard about it along the way. We're seeing a significant impact across the board. We're all seeing that. Whether we realize it or not, it's impacting things that we're doing every day. We're actually starting to see products hit the market that several years ago we wouldn't even have thought about. So we're starting to see products hit the market that do things like can provide significant tutoring, either to enrich or to support, to catch a student up, and start to respond to that student in a way where it recognizes that you're an Ohio State football fan. It'll start to adjust to your interests and include that in how it reacts to what's going on. We also know all the challenges with that, right? We've heard and we see some of those things that happen with AI, and creating that balanced space for how we work in those spaces. It matters how we react to it. But we need to consider how we use space and how we use different opportunities to innovate, to create opportunities for our kids, and continue to find ways to engage them in different opportunities along the way. I'll say, I'm going to use this building as an example. If you're ever on the other end of the hallway here, what you'll see is a very active space all the time. So you have this in the STEM Commons, you have multiple classrooms that are supporting that. You'll have Dana Schoenleb and all of his work around engineering. Aaron Hanselman is down there. Then you'll also find Kurt Bixel and Dr. Kale, Diane Kale on the other end. And what you're going to find is a combination of building, creating, robotics, STEM, all those things happening actively, and you'll see kids out testing their products and doing things on a consistent basis. The goal would have been, when we opened this building, how are we using those spaces actively? When you walk through that space and see it in action and see the way they've adjusted and used the space, that's a great example of how we're engaging students and how we can create those opportunities. So this is one portion of the strategic plan, but this is very important to us for how we look at the future and how we engage students. I think I'm turning it over to
Profile, Keith.
Oh, profile, sorry. Now let me stay on the profile. Yes, so when we look at the profile of an engaged learner, this actually was in our prior strategic plan. For those of you who've heard this before, I apologize, I'm going to say it again. We started this process and really gathered information from everywhere as we were trying to look at what are the things that we want our students to have when they leave the district. So what experiences are we creating throughout our entire structure from pre-K through 12? How are we creating opportunities to think about skills that we need kids to have when they leave the district and what we're preparing them for in life? And as we were doing that work, we were finalizing our process in March of 2020. And then a thing happened. And honestly, when we came back together to look at those things that we really valued and thought were important, some things shifted along the way. There were other things that we thought about coming out of that year and a half where we really couldn't move that forward. And these things are really important. These are, you will have heard along the way, what are the out of the basement skills that we need kids to have? You want them to grow up and be capable, but you also want them to eventually move out of your basement, right? Like, how do we prepare them for all the things that they need to be able to do? And so if we're developing true learners, doing all those things, we're focusing on solution seekers, skilled communicators who are creative, responsible and resilient, open-minded and empathetic, and well-balanced. And how do we make those things happen along the way? And that means creating experiences throughout their entire school life in order to make that happen. Now, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Keith.
Where's it back to Bob? Oh, no.
It's to me. Yep, it is to me. No, this is actually to you.
It's my picture. So just, I guess, to build upon, when we talk to the community about kind of the next iteration of excellence in Upper Arlington, this document kept coming up. Like, how do we continue to develop foundational knowledge and the key core concepts within the curriculum that students have to know and have to be able to function, but also develop these important skills? When I start to kind of read through these and think about how space and different strategies from a teaching perspective, there's certainly a correlation to the type of space that you need to really achieve these types of things. Okay, so the other thing that we did, we talked to our staff about the process in phase one and what we should add to or do differently in phase two. And they said, you really should talk to staff that have gone into the new buildings, and it's like building a house. There's always those things that, gosh, I wish we would have done this different. Like, find out what we should have done differently, but also talk to students about the spaces and what impact those spaces have had on them. I'm not going to read these to you, but if you want to have a little bit of a reality check, sit down with some high school students or sit down with some middle school students and ask them to tell you about their experience. So we had the opportunity to sit down, and this was this first group here was a group of freshmen, and we asked them to just tell us about the facility and how it supports what they do. And I think there's some things that are gems here that we walk away with that we should think about. One of them being, I think it's on this slide or the next slide, is the collaborative spaces, like you're in right now, are great with the garage doors, and you have those access. But when you don't have a garage door with some space to bleed into, the garage doors aren't as effective. So if you go down the hall here, you've got some garage doors that open just to large corridors. So really building in those spaces along the way. So you can see the different things that they had to say, both pros and cons about their experience in some of our facilities. The second group were mostly seniors. So these students had the opportunity, I think this group was actually in the old high school, right? 1 year? No? Okay, I made that up. All right. But again, just additional feedback from the students in terms of what they appreciate about the design. So I think these are just really important to think through in terms of student voice as we think about what our facilities, remaining facilities should look like moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve as they did the same type of work with some of our middle school students.
Right, thank you, Dr. Hunt. My name is Steve Turks. I'm an architect with Perkins and Will, and we're working with Moody Nolan here locally on the master plan, phase 2. So we did this, as Dr. Hunt said, we did a similar thing with the middle school students. Actually, what we did with them, you can sort of see if you look at this image here at the top, plaster some images up on the wall. Any of you that were involved in the first round of master plan may remember a similar exercise that we did when we were actually in the design phases for this project. But we put some themes up on the wall, themes like you can read the titles up here, you know, ideas about libraries and media spaces, about environmental stewardship, about flexibility. So there's a series of images. Put a green dot on it if you like it for some reason, put a red dot on it if you don't like it for some reason. So we call this exercise visual listening. So it's a way that we can listen and use visuals that folks either are attracted to or not to help us understand, you know, what are those things about that, whether it's daylight. And you can see some of the things, and we ask them to explain why they put their dots, why they did. So if you look at independent and collaborative spaces, they like those kind of spaces. They incorporate study in small group spaces. They like natural light. They like, you know, in their words, chill spaces, a place where they can sit and decompress. But again, not going to read all these things to you. They're certainly available, and it'll be online afterwards. But it's always insightful to talk to the kids. We always walk away learning a lot. So so we had 8 major themes, the ones that you just saw: visual and performing arts, fitness and wellness spaces, project-based spaces, and then dining and multi-purpose spaces. So really, really instructive and super helpful for us. So we did that at both Hastings and at Jones. We're now just going to launch in. Really, the theme for tonight is on the slide that you're looking at right now. We did this a number of years ago with you, but really just have a sort of an evening where we look at some visuals of learning environments from, you know, some are here in Ohio, some are actually here in Upper Arlington, your new ones, and those from other spots around the country. But just a little to set the stage, which Dr. Hunt and Dr. Palmer did quite effectively so far this evening, is really to always be thinking about who's walking in your door every day. This is your Gen Alphas. They don't know a world in which they can't pick up a device and gain instant access to technology. And Keith referred to this a moment ago, like there's all sorts of interesting new jobs that are going to be out there that really haven't even been invented yet that we're trying to prepare kids for, right? So it's a little bit daunting, but it's also exciting and super interesting at the same time. If you wind the reel back a century, or even more than a century, back in the late 1800s, I'm not even sure in 1892 if education was compulsory at that date. I don't think it probably was. But not long after that, it became compulsory, and this committee of 10 was formed, 10 learned men from around the country, and trying to standardize, as the slide says, the what, right? Trying to figure out what should the curriculum in the United States look like. And so they stewed over it and thought about it, and interestingly enough, if I look at my own high school experience, it's not that different than what they decided. So with a show of hands, tell me if this was your experience in high school. High school science is what I'm talking about now. So did you take high school science in this order? My freshman year, I took biology. My sophomore year, I took chemistry. Then my junior year, I took physics. Did you take them in that order? Raise your hand. Okay. Guess who decided that? These guys. Okay? Decided in 1892, and the reason they're in that order, anybody want to fathom a guess? Biology, chemistry, physics. Alphabetical. they actually couldn't land on, at that time, a logical reason why to put them in that order, so they put them in alphabetical order. So I was in high school a number of years ago, I will admit, but many high schools still teach them in that order. So there's a lot of things that we've done for years and years and years that it's worth looking at, like if we're still doing it, why do we do it now? We certainly want to pull the good things forward, but there's maybe some other things we want to think about differently. Again, Keith referred to this, like one of the things that's certainly consistent today or are given today, that things are changing faster than they ever have in the history of human history. Here's just one example. So in 1977, the hottest supercomputer on the market was called the Cray 1 supercomputer. This is sort of circular guy here. There was actually a bunch of electronics and computing below the seat there. This took the place of, if you remember those photographs from the 50s and 60s, an entire room filled with computing machines. You remember those, if you've seen those photos? This took the place of that at the cost of nearly $8 million. Okay? So 1977. So the folks that could afford these were places like Los Alamos or major governmental institutions, big universities, big research organizations could afford something like this. 40 years later, in 2017, I think if I got my math right, the iPhone 8, now this is several generations of phones ago, right? Hit the market for $700. It has the same processing speed as the Cray 1 supercomputer, right? So that amount of change in that short of period of time is quite remarkable, okay? And that's continuing. It has not stopped, for sure. Certainly, a lot of folks today are talking about, and it's referred to earlier in our session today, really, there's this sort of thing like, what gets learned at school is the content of school is super important. I'm a firm believer in that. But what you can do with that content, what you can demonstrate you can do is also equally important. So when we're hiring young architects, we are interested where you went to school, but what we're more interested is show us your portfolio of work, what you can demonstrate that you've actually done. So that's increasingly important. We have worked with educators across the country, and we've seen a transition happening over a number of years now to, if you look on the left side of the screen, it's pretty the way education's been organized for pretty traditionally for a number of years in the past. So what we would call sort of more directed, where it's more teacher-centered, where it is teacher-led, students are a little bit more passive, teacher's the owner of the information, giving it to the students, and really a transition to something that's much more active and engaging for students. And from our perspective, it's very much about student agency, right? Choice and voice. Do I have a choice? Do I have a voice in the path that I take? So classrooms become much more active. It's not so much about consuming information, it might be about creating new ideas and new information. And so the way space gets organized around that is different, right? The way I was, when at high school that I referred to, my classroom looked exactly like this, right? And my last name is Turks, so guess where I sat? In the back, right? Because, not only were the desks in rows, but, we were aligned alphabetically because every day when somebody checked attendance, it just made it easier to do it, right? So as opposed to, what we're seeing today, you're sitting in one of these environments right now with different kinds of furniture, different kinds of learning settings, different kinds of opportunities, spaces next to you that allow different learning modalities to take shape. But even within the classroom is still an important space in the school, okay? But even within those, we're looking for flexibility. So places so you have the same space, the same furniture, just arranged in different ways for different things to happen. So in seminar mode, in kids working on projects, collaborative projects, or in a group discussion, move the tables aside, let's get everybody in a circle and have a conversation. Okay, but again, it's very much about student agency. So the themes that you see running across, whether we're talking about flexibility or sustainability or creating healthy environments, health and wellness is a huge theme, a huge theme in our work now. I look at it as the theme that pulls the common thread through all that is about student agency, student choice, student voice, supporting what students are trying to do in school today. And so we talk a lot about this, this notion of it's important to understand the journey, right? As a student walks onto a campus every morning, what is it that they are engaged in every day? What does that learning journey want to look like? So before we design the space, the physical space that wraps around that and supports that learning, we want to understand the journey first. And with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Amy.
Hi, everybody. So we're going to take you on a little virtual tour. Have you all seen the 6 amazing buildings that have been transformed in Upper Arlington? How many of you have been to most of the buildings? So you've seen a lot of this stuff already. We're going to share with you some examples across the country, across the world, around mostly middle school and early learning focused spaces, because that's not what we did the first time around. So let's go on here. So the first couple slides are talking about things that are universal between middle and early learning schools. So safety. We hear about it all the time, and we could have a whole nother hour on it or more. But academic safety, feeling safe in what you're doing, feeling comfortable. A lot of those portrait of tell me again, engaged learner qualities, emotional safety, feeling like you have a safe space emotionally and physical. Feeling like you are safe in the space, that's the first thing people think of. But those are things that we want to make sure we include in all of our facilities that we're working on. Universal design is something that we also want to consider. So universal design takes accessibility to another level. It's not just providing the minimum or the code requirement for somebody who has mobility challenges. It is going above and beyond that. So it's making sure that it's not just talking about one type of design for one type of person, but it's for all kinds. So really individualizing and understanding that people have different needs around space, around sensory issues, etc. This is a picture of a sensory room. This is applicable across all grade levels, really, and we're seeing these pretty much every building that we design, and also in buildings that people make these themselves now because they are a needed element in facilities. So this is maybe a little much in this room. This is really everything's on here, but it's really a choice to engage the senses for students, small groups of students, one student, to go in and really, it could be a calming space, it could be just a chill space, but this is just a space that we see kind of everywhere. So something we should be looking for. So we're going to switch to early learning, some design principles around early learning, and just some images that support those design principles. And you'll see the engaged learner profile at the top there, some of those items. So those are kind of woven throughout all of these design principles. So community spaces, this is an entry, a warm and welcoming entry to an early childhood school. Spaces where parents can go and feel comfortable. And support their young learners. Child scaled, having little loft spaces, cozy corners, spaces where kids can go, that they feel choice in those spaces. Flexibility, there is a movable wall in between these 2 early learning rooms, and they do co-teach in here. But it can be closed off readily, very easily. We know that walls move only when they're very, very easy to move, so we want to make sure that if a movable wall is needed, that it's very easy to change. Inviting and imaginative, just fun little touches, things that make a space joyful and playful, especially for early learning, so whether that's color or shape. Creative storage and display, we know that there's a lot of stuff that comes in schools, but especially at the youngest ages, making sure that we're using that space really as hard as we can use it. So this is a wall that's a whiteboard wall, but it also carves in some little nooks for kids. It also carves in cubbies, lots of storage just in a couple of feet of depth. Steve talked about health and wellness, so just the connection to nature and how important health is to our students. Students spend, by the time they graduate high school, over 15,000 hours in school buildings. So really, maybe, other than sleeping, maybe more than in your homes. So it's imperative that the spaces support their health and well-being. And not just, again, physical health, but mental health as well, and social well-being. So again, continuing on that theme, this is a little kitchen area that's scaled for early learners. So it's a learning kitchen where they can cook, eat, and create with their teachers. Natural materials, you see the connectivity to outside, all the wooden furniture, that's something you see often in early learning. But really just that sense of connectivity to nature through the materiality. Again, connection to daylight and views, we know that kids do better, adults do better, everyone does better when they can see outside. It's actually better for proven brain health, relaxation with that. So this is another way of doing it. While you don't have a large body of water here to connect to, you would love to have those kiddos be able to get outside to the beautiful play areas and outdoor learning. And fostering natural curiosity, again, whether that's outdoors or indoors, just different ways of doing things, learning gardens, etc. And places to play, of course, inside and out, very, very important. So we'll switch to middle school. You heard flexibility from a number of us today, so continuing the flexibility idea. This is where you'll see here, right behind us, the garage doors. This is a kind of a side-by-side door, but this middle school opens to a commons area, just like the one you're sitting in. This is, again, flexibility within the classroom, so big sliding panels of whiteboards with storage behind it. This is a collaborative space with those two classrooms joined together, so you saw that same theme in the early childhood. We want to make sure that educators can collaborate as well. Just a few feet down the hall is a centralized office space, collaborative space for the high school educators here. So making sure that the grade level teams and the teachers have space to get together and to collaborate and do their job. Making space work hard. This is a theme that you see that we did for all of the buildings, because there's always a budget, there's always a square footage, and that's tied to the budget. So how can you make a space that maybe sits idle for most of the day or half of the day, not do that? How can you make it work all day long? So Golden Bear Boulevard right out there is a great example of this. It is pre-function space for theater, for gym, for the natatorium, but it's also every single day a place where kids collaborate and eat, and it's used all day long. So this is a similar space where the library is right outside, that colorful glass wall right outside a cafeteria, and it's used as an extension of the library when it's not in use for dining. Rethinking the corridor, again, you're sitting in a space that does that, where the line is just divided between the materials and the floor of what you can do when you just widen a space that you need anyway to circulate from point A to point B. So this is kind of carving out little nooks for little small group areas, little library areas along this corridor. Connected, this is actually a great space for this as well. And not only visually connected all around, but connected three-dimensionally so that students walking around on the first floor and second floor can actually see what's going on, not just in their own area on level one. So similar in this example here. Oh, we already saw that one. Hands-on. We know Keith was talking about data show labs, hands-on, and all the STEM stuff that happens just down the hallway. This is a great example of a makerspace, but the great thing I love about this image is everything in here is movable. All the equipment can change over time because these buildings are going to last a very long time. You just need the utilities, the power, the water, the flexibility in the furniture and equipment to be able to change the space over time. So this is what it is now, and it might look very different in a few years. Celebrating the evidence and artifacts of learning is really just about display and providing 3- and 2-dimensional display and even technology display like we have behind us, where kids' work can be displayed and celebrated. Supporting the whole child. This is around arts and athletics, providing those spaces that support not just the core academic uses. So this is, again, the weight room. You have all this stuff for this this building. Wonderful gym spaces. And Steve is going to talk a little bit more about middle school planning.
Yeah. So we'll start with this example. This is a middle school that we did additions to. In fact, those are the additions in St. Louis. It's in the, if you know any school districts here, this is in Ladue, it's Ladue School, so it's Ladue Middle School. And so we added some academic and library space to the left, new administration and an extension to the cafeteria in the center, and there ICC, what we call an ICC 500 rated storm shelter was required by code, so that's off to the right there in the form of a new multi-purpose gym. But this is, it just gives you a glimpse, so we thought it might be instructive to show actually an addition and renovation to an existing middle school. This is the new library. It collects a lot of grade level teams, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, around it. And your middle schools here are organized into grade level teams. So you can see the brick wall in the background. That was the old exterior wall of the old building. So media center in the center, and then flanking that are classrooms and these sort of breakout spaces, not unlike what you're sitting in, that allow sort of this kind of connection between classroom and breakout space. And so the diagram that you see here for Ladue that's their team, the components of it. So there's science, other core classrooms, so that could be math, English, social studies, right? So we're going across disciplines there in a grade level team, again, similar to here. And then coupled with those spaces were a collaboration space and then a couple of small group spaces. To provide, one of the things, Amy talked about flexibility, another sort of key word is variety, right? So those very traditional schools that were built, right after right during the start of the baby boom, right, in the 50s and 60s, where we had to crank out schools, right, because there were so many children that needed space. They were the same classroom on either side of a corridor as most of the schools that you and I went to, right? The exact same classroom right down the corridor. So providing some variety in the types of space allows different kind of learning settings to take place. So this, again, is designed supporting that grade level teaming model that's pretty common in middle schools. So that's new space, right? This is space we added. These are spaces that we renovated within the existing building. So again, this collaboration space that you are sitting in, we carved it out of a couple classrooms, and then there's an operable wall to a classroom that existed. There's one behind us in the image as well. That actually allows 4 of these spaces to connect to each other to bring an entire grade level team together into one space for a grade level meeting, a couple small group spaces off to the right. A new middle school in South Carolina. So you're seeing, we're going to focus on the right, but on the left are a lot of shared things. So the library, administrative spaces, art, music, PE, dining, all those what we call here related arts. To the right, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level teams. So multiple teams in each one of those sort of academic houses, if you will, or those pods off the right. Science, though, was seen as this sort of along one corridor, and so a grade level could go over, and for that grade level interdisciplinary teaming, those are the science labs that go with 8th grade. These are the science labs and tech labs that go with 7th. So one of the things that we were thinking about here was flexibility in the way they organize learning in the building. So if they wanted to become a departmental middle school, they could actually do it. Why? Because science is on a corridor. They're all together, right? You could think about assigning a department to a floor of this pod, right? So this is all English. That's all math. That's all social studies. So there's a way to, without changing a single doorknob, to change the way the building is organized educationally, right? So thinking about it that way in terms of building-wide flexibility was also important. So this is what it looks like from the outside. Those are the grade level houses marching off to the left there. The library is that sort of colorful glass piece over there to the right. And then a couple of other thoughts and ideas. We talk a lot about spaces for kids to collaborate. We also know it's also really important that if I need a quiet space that I can just be by myself and sort of decompress or sit with a friend, that we create those kind of spaces as well. So again, variety and choice, a place I can just curl up with a book, sitting next to a window looking at a nice view. And then there's a lot of work and a lot of conversation happening around sustainability today. And lots of really interesting opportunities to create healthy buildings that are really energy efficient and can teach our students about being good stewards of the environment. Here, right, here in this building, good schools we know have good cultures, right? Those two things go hand in hand. So how can you reinforce that, and how can you celebrate your own history are, important things to think about and to consider. Windermere Elementary School, organized around, academic areas around the media center and then sort of shared facilities over here. That's one of those grade level pods, not dissimilar to the middle school concept we were talking about, but instead of a team, it's a grade level where you've got classroom spaces that open to common spaces, and there's a little bit of porosity between the two to allow lots of different learning settings to happen. So Windermere Elementary. And then here at the high school, one of the big ideas here was, of course, Golden Bear Boulevard, which connects, it's the thread that connects what you sometimes consider more the private side of the building, if you will, or these the core academics where we are now, to more of the spaces that the public often visits, like theaters and gyms and natatoriums. But Golden Bear Boulevard stitches it all together. And here we are, right in the core heart of one of the academic neighborhoods. So you can kind of see it here in this graphic, and you can just look around and see the sort of the connections between the various types of spaces. In fact, the photo will end right here in this space. This is the STEM comments on the other end of the building that was referred to earlier. Okay, I'm going to end real quick with this story. How are we doing on time? We're okay. Excuse me. So in the mid-1800s, if you wanted to have a photograph taken, you had to have a guy that had a pretty bespoke and somewhat fancy camera, right? Because we were exposing onto a glass plate. So you can keep seeing images of this, right? Put a black cloth over your head and you take a picture and you have to hold very still and you can't move. That's why those pictures of my great-great-grandparents, they're stone-faced, right? Because you had to hold perfectly still. So that's what it was like back then. Toward the end of the 1800s, in fact, I think it was 1888 maybe, this is the first sort of personal camera. It was put out by a company at the time was called the Eastman Dry Plate and Film Company. The name Eastman may ring a bell to you. The name of the camera was the Kodak camera. It became so popular, they changed the name of the company to Eastman Kodak. But when you got the camera, it would be loaded with 100. It had a roll of film, which was a new invention. 100 frames. You take 100 photos, but it became folks' personal camera. When you needed to develop, you'd send it back to Kodak. They would develop the film and reload it for you and send back the pictures. Let's fast forward to my youth, which has been a few years ago now. This was my Kodak camera. Anybody else have a camera like this? You guys are maybe too young, I don't know. It was plastic bodied. It actually was not all that great of a camera. But when I took a picture, here's the thing to take a picture, had four flash bulbs around each side of this. It would turn a quarter turn if I needed a flash, right? So that was my camera. But interestingly enough, while Kodak made cameras, obviously, they were not known as a camera company. There were much better camera companies out there. What was Kodak known for? Film, right? Every professional photographer used Kodak film, right? That's where they innovated constantly, was around film photography. Well, lo and behold, in 1977, this is an engineer from Kodak. His name's Steve Sessions. And what he's got hoisted up on his shoulder there is something that he invented while he was there. Anybody want to fathom a guess what that is?
The instant camera?
I'm sorry?
The instant?
First instant camera, like a Polaroid kind. It's actually an interesting guess, but that's not it. Any other guesses? Kind of looks like a video camera, it's certainly big enough to be one, right? It's still not it. Any other guesses, real quick, before I tell you what the answer is? It is the first digital camera. First digital camera. It weighed 8 pounds. It had 1/10 of 1 megapixel in terms of its resolution, and it recorded the images on a little cassette guy, right, that I used to stick in my dashboard when I was, driving around listening to music. So guess what Kodak did with that first digital camera? Nothing, right? Because why? Kodak was a film company. They weren't a digital. They didn't see the headlights coming, right? Today, any professional photographer used to stop guys. Our office was right across the street from what used to be the Chicago Tribune. And you'd stop photographers and say, "Hey, what kind of camera are you using there?" Digital, all of them, right? So the moral of this story is, I'll get to it. When we're thinking about the kinds of spaces that we create for students, it really is important to think, to look in the rearview mirror and pull all the good things forward that you're doing, and the kinds of spaces to support that. But it's equally important to be really thinking about their future. So we need to be asking ourselves these questions. Are we designing for our educational experiences, when I was in high school, or are we designing for your kid's future? And hopefully, we're heavily tilted toward the future here. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. We've got, you want me to do this or you want to do this? Okay. We've got, like we have at all these sessions. So today was really more about just sort of helping folks understand what's going on out there in terms of educational environments. Because we are getting ready to launch into, or actually we already are launched into the options phase. We'll be sharing those with building teams, all the building teams, and then at the community engagement session coming up. And as we're doing that, we want to be thinking about that learning journey that we talked about and all those important characteristics, supporting an engaged learner, supporting the UA's strategic mission and vision. But we would love to get your thoughts as the community on these 4 questions. What in the presentation resonated with you? How might the physical environment, number 2, how might the physical environments of our schools be better designed to support future learning? If your response is focused on a specific school, please indicate that in your response. What additional information would help us during the options phase in our master plan? And are there any other thoughts you'd like to add about the facilities master planning phase 2? So just whatever's on your mind. So there's a link, QR code on the screen. There's also a link. And Colleen has got hard copies there. She also has hard copies of the presentation. I don't know if she's got enough for everybody in the room, but there's certainly enough for you to look over your neighbor's shoulder. If there's things you want to refer back to in the presentation, please feel free to do that. Or we're here to answer questions as well. But there's a link. We would love to get your feedback, if possible. And that's we're wrapping it up. So, Dr. Hunt.
So again, I want to thank you for coming. Tonight really was mostly designed for building team members to start to really think through what's out in the future and what are we trying to create for our students as we enter into the next options phase. Also give you some time to collaborate and have some conversations at your table on the way out to respond to these questions, and your feedback is very, very important. I think the last thing I'd like to do, and we're going to put these up here in a minute as well, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I think February 18 and 19 is going to be our next community meeting. So for those of you who are not serving on building teams will get a look at the options, and we'll also bring those to our community. That will be kind of the first time where we bring options forward for your feedback. It's certainly not the last time. The reason we're bringing them forward is to get feedback so we know kind of where to go next, and we'll bring another round of options out. So those are really important. The other thing is, you saw a lot of pictures of facilities tonight. We've had some level of interest in seeing what the current facilities look like. So Our principals have been good enough to design some times and opportunities for folks to tour the building. So we'll put those dates up for you as well moving forward. So again, thank you very much for coming tonight. If you have a few minutes, if you want to stay and give us your feedback, great. If you have to run, we understand that as well, but we please ask you to just take a few minutes to get feedback. Also, we've got a lot of people in the room that work in these facilities, and I'm certainly happy to stay around to answer any questions. All right, thank you very much.